There's a famous line in TV from the show Breaking Bad. He can't keep getting away with this. I think that's how the NFL feels about Eric DeCosta and the Baltimore Ravens after they took Malaki Starks, safety out of Georgia, at pick 27. We talk about how Baltimore is once again a clear winner on day one, as well as the media reaction to the Malaki Starks pick and where they could go on day two. All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week daily Ravens podcast. Monday through Friday, we have regularly scheduled episodes, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Plus, we go live after every single piece of Ravens big news, like we did last night, or I guess early this morning, in relation to the Malaki Starks pick. We also go live after every single Ravens game. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, first-time listeners, and if you're in the middle, appreciate all the support here on the show. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Happy Purple Friday, everybody. The Ravens, they make another great selection, in my opinion. Malaki Starks. We'll get into my opinions on the pick. If you tuned into the live stream last night, we had my instant reaction over on the live stream there. It was an awesome time. Thankful to everybody who tuned in for that. If you didn't, don't worry about it. You can always catch the next one, turn notifications on in video form. But if you don't catch them, you can always listen to them, watch them after the fact. And we talked a lot about Starks, his fit with the Ravens. We're going to dive into more detail on that here today. The Ravens clear winners again on day one. We'll talk about why. We'll also talk about the media reaction to the pick. Pat McAfee, Darius Butler, Daniel Jeremiah, Gerald McCoy. So many reactions we have to get into at this pick. Plus, we'll talk about what Malaki Starks said in his introductory press conference, or at least his introductory media availability, and then what Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh had to say about the pick as well. Plus, we got another day here. The draft is coming up again, 7 p.m. when it starts up, day two. We'll talk about who the Ravens should take and who might fall to them in rounds 2 and 3. Let's start off with the Malaki Starks analysis. Again, Malaki Starks at pick 27, essentially a guy that fell right into Baltimore's lap. To me, I said I'd reveal my grade today. I think this is an A pick, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why. A couple of different reasons. One, you just look at who Malaki Starks is as a player. Very little weakness to his game. He'll miss some tackles here and there. He might get fooled with misdirections a little bit here and there. But everything he does is so calculated, and he's such a competitor. His ball tracking is exceptional. And I know that people must say, well, that's not that big of a deal. And my response is, hey, here in Baltimore, we had to watch Brandon Stevens last season. It is a big deal. But it's so much more than that. He has positional versatility, playing in single high, playing up in the box, playing slot cornerback, someone who has athleticism to his game. He can come up and hit somebody in the run game and play with physicality. He's able to really help also in coverage when it comes to shutting things down, whether it be as a guy in single high and is a ball hawk. Teams don't want to throw Kyle Hamilton's way. They don't want to throw Marlon Humphrey's way. They don't want to throw Nate Wiggins' way. Now you got to throw Malaki Starks. And I know that people, and I understand if you feel this way, I truly do. Some people wanted trenches in round 1, whether it be defensive line, edge, offensive line. I hear you and I understand you if that is where you're coming from, because it's a need. And entering day 2, we'll talk about it. That has to be priority number 1 for the Ravens. They took a safety. Now you got to turn your attention to the trenches. But here's my thing when kind of going through my evaluation and why personally I believed, and if you'd listen to me on this show, if you were listening to me every day, or, you checked in once in a while for my draft coverage, I was kind of floating the idea, whether it was Starks, Nicky Manwari, Xavier Watson in the second round, like, hey, Baltimore's probably going to spend a high pick on a safety. And the reason I said it was for a couple of reasons. One, Just because you have Kyle Hamilton there does not mean it's not a position of need. And look, I don't know about anybody else, but I think a lot of people tuning into this, watched the Ravens in some capacity last season. I mean, I think so. But even if not, I'll give a little history lesson of the 2024 Ravens. We had to watch Marcus Williams fall off a cliff. We had to watch Eddie Jackson lose them games actively last season. And watching all of that, safety was a heck of a need for the Ravens because we saw all that happen and they didn't add anybody in free agency. They had Hamilton back in the deep part of the field as necessity. Darius Washington did a great job in fill-in duty, but you have to have more than that. And let's just say Hamilton goes down for a little bit or Darius goes down for a little bit and they don't have a guy like Malaki Starks. Where do you turn to? Like, you could take a safety in the third or fourth round, but are you going to trust the guy to fill in like that? This gives the Ravens so many options defensively. I mentioned it gives the Ravens options with Kyle Hamilton and lets him move back to his spot as the Swiss Army knife of Baltimore's defense, where, yes, Kyle Hamilton can play deep. Everybody understands that. But in my opinion, Hamilton is at his best when he can roam around and do his thing. Starks over his college career, 3 years at Georgia, 197 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 6 interceptions. Was an All-American in 2023. He has been playing in big games since he got to Georgia. It's about being in the SEC, playing those high-level games, and this is what the Ravens do. There's been a little bit of a shift under Eric DeCosta. Ozzie Newsome obviously still is in the building, but the Ravens love those bigger school prospects. Not that they didn't love them under Ozzie, but the Ravens have shifted away from taking some smaller school players where, you're getting the Georgias and the Oklahomas, et cetera. Boston College relative to those schools is small, but still, like, you're going and dipping into these Power 5 conferences, teams that have been there, done that. And Malaki Starks with so many high leverage plays. He's great as a leader, as a communicator. He's a competitor. This was a guy that a lot of teams, if the draft didn't, one, fall the way that it did, and two, have the players it did, Malaki Starks probably was a top 15 player in this class. But here's the reality of the situation. There was a run on offensive linemen, and that the offensive line was running thin. Teams had to probably press up a little more on the offensive line that maybe they were thinking, oh, somebody's going to fall, or we can get a guy in the second round. Then all of a sudden, all these guys go off the board. Same thing with defensive linemen. This is a very deep defensive line class, but once those defensive linemen started flowing, teams like Arizona, who took Walter Nolan, or others, were like, okay, we really like a guy, but all of a sudden, we can't trade out and allow another opportunity for a team to go up there and get somebody else. We need to go get our guy here. There were 2 quarterbacks that went in the first round, Jackson Dart and obviously Cam Ward at number 1. But as these edge guys got taken, as these defensive linemen got taken, you just saw the runs, offensive linemen. It pushed everybody down. Jahdae Barham goes at 20 to the Broncos. Will Johnson doesn't even get taken in the first round. Neither does Nicky Manwari. The Ravens capitalized on that. They understood that they could operate from a position of, well, if a secondary run happens, there'll be a defensive lineman that falls. If a lineman run happens, offensively or defensively or both, a secondary guy's going to fall. And apparently, Eric DeCosta said that Malaki Starks was by far the highest remaining player on their board when he was drafted. He had a red star, which means that he aced everything. The Ravens give out grades in 7s. So 7 is the highest you can get. Malaki Starks, 7s across the board in his interviews. Eric DeCosta said that he was one of the best interviews the Ravens have ever had. And he said that it felt weird because, remember, we talked about it yesterday with Sam and Njoku about, are all these mock drafts saying that Malaki Starks is going to Baltimore? Is that just a smokescreen? Do they want Nicky Manwari? I thought it was, because the Ravens don't let that stuff get out of the building. So when it does, and everybody's kind of jointing that opinion, it feels weird because that doesn't happen with the Ravens. But Starks is a player that is a safe pick. I think that if you talk about upside, Nicky Manwari as a safety has the higher upside than Malaki Starks in terms of if they both reach their peaks, both are superstar players. Both are awesome. But I think that Manwari probably has the higher overall max ceiling. But I think Malaki Starks is ready to play now, and that's what the Ravens need. They don't need to risk it on Manwari. Like, again, Manwari was my number 1 safety. Starks was 2, but that doesn't mean that I don't think this pick is awesome for Baltimore and isn't perfect for what they need, because Manwari would have been great in terms of, oh, you get another Kyle Hamilton on the field, and if you want to keep him in the deep part of the field, Manwari can be that Swiss Army knife. But the Ravens, I know there have been reports they want to keep him in the deep part of the field. I think this makes the most sense if Hamilton goes up, plays a Swiss Army role, and Starks can be that guy with the ball production, the ball skills that he has to be a player that can be a staple in that secondary for the next 10 to 15 years. Hopefully that's the ceiling that he reaches. Plus the fact that Kyle Hamilton is going to get a pretty hefty contract coming up. It gives you insurance for Hamilton to have Hamilton on that deal, but not have to break the bank for your other safety. Because look, Ardarius, I don't know how much confidence is in the building for Ardarius right now. I think Ardarius is awesome, but they didn't sign him to an extension. They gave him a pretty low tender, so they didn't necessarily feel like it was imperative to re-sign him. I think it's good he's back, and they're happy he's back. But, what's the long-term future of Ardarius? You don't know. So safety was still a need. It's not a premium position, and I think that's why some people are upset, and I understand it. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad pick. And that Baltimore, again, if they just had one pick and it was Malaki Starks, yeah, it'd be a bit of an issue because they wouldn't be able to address their offensive line or defensive line or edge or whatever. But as we're going to talk about in the final part of the show, the board fell perfectly for them at 27, where if it wasn't Starks, and, the Ravens mentioned this, it would have been somebody else. The board fell the way that they felt comfortable with it. I wouldn't have been shocked if they had traded back because there are so many guys available. But they have opportunities to add to the trenches. Plus, I think at safety, there's a steeper drop-off in guys than there is at D lineman or even edge. I mean, offensive linemen, a lot of the guys were gone that I would have taken at 27. I mean, Tyler Booker reportedly was on their short list of guys that they wanted. He goes to Dallas at 12. Gray Zabel goes. All these guys are flying off the board. I guess Josh Simmons was really the only one that you could have made an argument for, and I would have been totally fine with that. But that was the only guy where after Simmons, there is a steep drop-off in offensive lineman, but it's not as steep as safety after Starks, Eamon and Xavier Watts. So I think you feel comfortable enough taking a Wyatt Milum or Tate Ratledge or one of those guys we'll get to in the final part of the show, just because safety isn't as premium as a quarterback or as an offensive lineman or as a cornerback doesn't mean it's still not important. Baltimore is able to operate with this positional flexibility and this freedom because of how they approach their offseason. They didn't lose a ton to the point where they had to take somebody. Like, yes, trenches are important, 100%. And I want them to take that multiple guys on day two here as we'll talk about. But you look at the Steelers trading for DK Metcalf and the Bengals re-signing Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and the Browns who – we thought it was Travis Hunter, but I guess they went in a different direction. But Jerry Jeudy came on late. Maybe they're going to add somebody on day two. We don't know. The AFC has a bunch of guys, and we watched that Ravens secondary struggle. They were one of the worst secondaries in the league in the first part of the year. And, it's not like Baltimore was able to have long-term fixes there. They got a short-term fix. It worked out for them great, but this offseason was about fixing it long-term. You got Malaki Starks, who does fix this long-term for you. Him and Kyle Hamilton will be an exceptional duo together, especially what Starks brings to the table. And he's someone that a lot of people talk about as a quality starter, potential franchise defensive back. Like everybody, or at least most people, right? I know everybody's not a fan, but most people seem to be a fan of this pick. And I personally am very excited about it. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll continue talking about Malaki Starks, getting to some of the media reaction from former players, former coaches, current players, etc., and a lot more. So stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. You can post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. And LinkedIn is the place to go for all of your job and hiring needs. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Again, post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking after night one of the 2025 NFL Draft. Baltimore takes Malaki Starks at pick number 27, and they still have a lot of work to do. Round 2, round 3, that will happen tonight, and we'll, of course, be live after that ends up happening. And then we'll have a bonus episode on Saturday breaking it down a little bit more, and we'll talk about what Baltimore could do on day 2 in the final part of the show. But I want to keep talking about Malaki Starks and get into some of the reactions from this pick. Me, obviously, I love the pick. I think Baltimore got a guy that, again, you kind of look around the NFL and feels like Baltimore and Philly are those two teams that everybody looks at and is like, man, they did it again. And that's the thing. It just felt so easy for Baltimore here. I kind of mentioned how the board fell and a bunch of runs on different positions that Baltimore could have been interested in, but didn't need to be interested in. You know, it's kind of like, they need to be interested in it for the 3 days of the draft, like in terms of the whole 3 days. But in terms of the first round, they could have gone in a bunch of different directions. It started with someone they really liked, and they just kind of sat there, let it all unfold. And a guy who has the potential to be one of the best players in this class falls due at 27. They just say, okay, cool. You know, I know that they were exploring some trade back options, but they said that Starks was just too good to trade away from. Like, you know, just it is what it is. He's one of those guys that has true impact potential. And you look at some of the response from the media, former players, former coaches, and it's just, you know, through the roof of quality that people think that the Ravens got here. I mean, you can look to a bunch of different guys. I mean, you can start with Gerald McCoy, who was actually almost a Raven, so honorary Raven in my opinion. Gerald McCoy said that Malaki Starks, in his opinion, is the best defensive player in the draft. He said, quote, you partner him with Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore. Lamar Jackson has been phenomenal. He's been generational. He got Derrick Henry. We talk about this offense. This organization is built on defense. You had a Malaki Starks who are right back in the mix, being right at the top of the defense. This guy's a ball hawk. He can play man-to-man. He can play zone. If he gets beat, he can run you down. So Gerald McCoy there just gushing over Malaki Starks. Brian Baldinger was bullish on the Malaki Starks, Kyle Hamilton duo. Darius Butler over on the Pat McAfee show said, you have so many guys in that secondary now with versatility. I love everything about this pick. This has Chuck Pagano written all over it in terms of the pick. Obviously, Chuck Pagano now with the Ravens. He did work for the Pat McAfee show for a little bit there. Pat McAfee mentioning that he's a big-time player, played in a lot of big games. And Mike McCarthy said that his tenacity was awesome, and he loved the pick. Daniel Jeremiah said he's an excellent communicator, an excellent leader. You have former Ravens like Torrey Smith weighing in, saying that it's a pick that Baltimore, they win. Great player, even better person. Baltimore City won with this pick. That's what Torrey Smith said. Emmanuel Acho, who notoriously, you know, Ravens fans and Acho don't get along so well, but Acho says Malaki Starks and Kyle Hamilton, the Ravens aren't playing fair. There's no player whose playing style fits a team better than Malaki to the Ravens. 10 out of 10, no notes. You also have Robert Griffin III. Malaki Starks plays like a Raven. Perfect fit. Chris Sims, Malaki Starks is a Raven-type player. Free safety ball hawk for sure. Nickel ability to recognition of plays is where he's special. I mean, that's all stuff we've talked about here. The versatility, the leadership, the ability to make big-time plays, the ability to play in big-time games and have that experience. Everything that Malaki Starks brings to the table, it's a safe pick because there are little to no weaknesses in his game right now. And again, the stuff that he does need to work on, like the getting fooled on misdirections at times or whiffing on tackles at points, those are things that can be corrected, but you can't teach some of the instincts that he has. You can't teach some of the ball skills that he has. You can't teach some of the versatility that he's able to play with. Like, it's just, he brings so much to you. And again, I truly do believe that if the draft didn't fall the way that it did, he would have been taken earlier. And the reason teams did pass up on him is why did teams pass on Kyle Hamilton? Because safety is not a premium position. The way that free agency works, the way that the NFL works, everything that goes into this, quarterbacks, big time deals, wide receivers, $100 million contracts, Jamar Chase, all, big time contracts, corners, $100+ million, edge guys, Myles Garrett getting paid $1 bajillion over there in Cleveland. Teams want those premium positions. That's why running back and all these, inside linebacker. Yeah, the top of the top at inside linebacker, like a Roquan, They do get $100 million. Safety, Kyle Hamilton probably going to get $100 million. But that is very few and far in between, where if you don't have a Kyle Hamilton or a Roquan Smith on your roster, you don't have to pay them that money, at least not right now, because Hamilton hasn't even gotten his deal. And even if you have like a top 10 inside linebacker on your roster, you don't have to pay them nearly as much as if you have it like the 10th inside linebacker and the 10th wide receiver. It's such a drastic difference. And that's the same thing with safety. So teams want those guys on 4 to 5 year rookie deals, and they want to make sure that they get those. Defensive line, we've seen those contracts balloon in recent seasons. Same thing with the O-line. That's premium. Offensive tackles. So safety's not that position when Baltimore lets a guy like Kyle Hamilton fall into their lap at 14, right? And again, I know there were concerns about the athleticism, yada, 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 but it's the same premise. And, you know, the Raiders taking Ashton Genty at 6, that's something where I saw like a lot of people loved it, but some people still are stuck in the way of, hey, you shouldn't take a running back that early. That's a waste of an asset, which I don't agree with. I mean, I thought Saquon was a good pick at 2, et cetera, et cetera. If a guy can play, a guy can play. And Malaki Starks certainly can. And you see the response to this, and it's just like teams like Baltimore and Philly and you know, even Pittsburgh is in this conversation, as much as I hate to say it, but it's like those teams find ways to just get quality dudes and not really have to work for it. Like Philly traded up 1 pick for Jahad Campbell. The Steelers, I thought, actually made a good pick in taking Derrick Harmon and not Shedeur Sanders. Like I thought they needed guys on the defensive line. They did. By the way, the AFC North is apparently terrified of the Ravens. Terrified of the Ravens because what happened? The Browns traded from 2 to 5, and they took Mason Graham out of Michigan, defensive lineman. Then you have the Bengals. They took Shamar Stewart, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. Then you have Steelers at Derrick Harmon, Oregon, defensive lineman. Teams in the AFC North are drafting to stop Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and the Baltimore Ravens. But that's out of necessity. Now, is that the only thing they're talking about? No, but it certainly is a factor. But that's the difference. Those teams are trying to catch up to Baltimore. The Ravens are trying to catch up to Kansas City and win a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that the other teams aren't trying to win a Super Bowl, but the Ravens aren't thinking about Pittsburgh or Cleveland or Cincinnati when they're making their selections. Obviously, they want to be able to beat those teams consistently, but it feels like teams draft to beat the Ravens, especially in that division. Malaki Starks is a player that would have probably fit in Cincinnati. He could have fit in a place like Pittsburgh if they don't want Deshaun Elliott there long term, or they see him as a slot corner guy instead and they want to place him there full time. But the Steelers got ran over by Baltimore, so what do? They take a defensive lineman. You know, it's chestnut checkers here. Eric DeCosta taking advantage of the situation and getting a player who, in my opinion, I mean, I know people are concerned. The other concern with Malaki Starks is the size, which I'm not really a big, at least for Malaki. It's not like he's not this like small safety. I mean, he's about 6'1", 205, like right in that range. That's not small for a safety. I mean, Ardarius is small for a safety, but even he plays with a lot of physicality. So does Malaki. I mean, you talk about the run grade. PFF has him at a 90.6 run grade since 2023, which is 4th among safeties at his position. And then you have even just fans, like, you know, analysts, content creators who were like Ravens fans, man. There's just like, there's no better player than Starks. Everybody, and these are from teams that aren't Ravens fans. Like, these are guys who cover other teams. Like, the guy's known as a top 10 player in college football the last 2 seasons. Once you get to a certain level, like, yes, Mike Green would have been a good pick if he didn't have all the, you know, allegations against him, but maybe the Ravens had him off their board because of that. There are just so many different factors, and the Ravens clearly were in love with Malaki Starks. They were probably in love with a couple other players too. They wanted to give themselves options, and they landed one of the guys that they absolutely loved. So I thought it was great for Baltimore. And coming up, hopefully we get a couple more great picks tonight on day 2. We'll be talking about who that could be and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel, and the NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. And I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, from 3-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. I'm really glad that the draft happened last night because it prevented me from watching the Nuggets. I'm a Nuggets fan, and the Nuggets lost by a bajillion points to the Clippers. They're down 2-1. So if you ended up going with the Nuggets over on FanDuel, I apologize for that. But hey, you know what? If you went with the Clippers, you probably won big over on FanDuel. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Purple Friday. Night 1 of the NFL draft is officially over. We got night 2 coming up. We'll be live here on the channel after night 2 concludes. We'll be talking about who the Ravens picked, what their process was, and how we liked it. So we're going to be diving into all of that just couple minutes after, maybe probably 30 minutes max after, we'll see, but we will be live. So be sure to turn notifications on, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. And of course, in audio form as well, you can follow along and subscribe over there. It's the same show, both audio and video. So you're not missing out on any which way you produce our content. Really appreciate all the support here on the show. We had a great live stream last night or early this morning talking about Malaki Starks, and we're diving into it again here. So I'm all on board with this selection. I think there were a couple of other guys Baltimore could have taken that I would have been equally as thrilled with, but it makes sense when you talk about Malaki. Now, when you look ahead to day 2, it has to be trenches, offensive line, defensive line, edge, because this is what the positional freedom was. And I talked about this earlier in the show. If the Ravens had taken a defensive lineman in round 1 or an edge in round 1, whoever it is, whatever it would have been, offensive line, my thought process would have been, okay, now you got to address the secondary. But now that Baltimore has a safety in the books, well, all right, now you got to focus on the trenches. And there are plenty of options for Baltimore in rounds 2 and 3 that could help them. The only exception I would make is Will Johnson out of Michigan, who is a top 10 player in this class, but has a knee concern that is apparently scaring teams off in the worst way. So if he falls at 59, there must be something clearly seriously wrong with that knee. And maybe teams just have him off their board altogether. So we'll see how that works. But I think other guys that make sense for Baltimore, again, Mike Green, I'm just not sure if Baltimore has him on their board. I feel like if they did, they would have taken him in the first round. Donovan Izaraku would probably be a dream for me at 59. He's someone that I had in consideration for them at 27. I would have been totally fine with that pick as well. You can also look at JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State. Jack Sawyer, another guy out of Ohio State that fits the Ravens profile for the edge position. Nick Scourton makes some sense for them. Savon Revel, but again, we're talking trenches. So I think that even guys like him, Benjamin Morrison, that doesn't make a lot of sense for Baltimore right now. If the Ravens stick with their 2 top 100 picks remaining, what you have to do, 2 out of the 3, offensive line, defensive line, edge. That's where it is. So if it's a Jonah Savanaya out of Arizona, or maybe you go with Tate Ratledge or Wyatt Malum, like any of those guys, they make sense for Baltimore in the 2nd or 3rd rounds, depending on where you have those guys graded. I think Marcus Bowe out of Purdue also, 6'7", 313, has mobility and is actually a bit of a tweener for his size. People kind of like him on the inside as opposed to outside. I think Baltimore probably wants to take a versatile player that you can experiment with, but experiment with in future seasons. So, for example, if they had taken Josh Simmons in the 1st round, they would have probably kicked him inside the guard. I mean, you're not going to start him at tackle because you have your tackles. So if you feel like a guy can play both guard and tackle, you're going to take that guy in the 2nd and 3rd round, and I would hope kick him inside the guard because personally, I don't really trust Daniel Falele right now, and Andrew Voorhees is kind of a wild card. I mean, I honestly trust Voorhees more than Falele. And look, Falele had great moments last year. I'm not going to try to take that away from him, but his mistakes were very loud and actively cost the Ravens multiple games, in my opinion. So, I would prefer insurance there. On the defensive line, we talked about this on the live stream. You really have 4 options you can trust, both on the interior and the edge position: Edafe Owe, Kyle Van Noy, Nnamdi Madubuike, and Travis Jones. And this D line class is so deep. And that's the other reason why I think Baltimore went with Malaki Starks in the 1st round, is because they felt confident enough with how deep this defensive line class was that they also felt that there were enough edge guys in the 2nd and 3rd rounds and enough offensive linemen in the 2nd and 3rd rounds where the drop-off is less substantial after the top handful of guys, as opposed to at safety, where after Watts, Starks, and even Worry, I mean, you're talking about like Andrew Mukuba out of Texas and Billy Bowman, those types of guys, which that is a steep drop-off. Defensive line, I'd feel more than comfortable in the 4th round if Baltimore took a Darius Alexander or Jordan Phillips out of Maryland or Ty Alexander, an ISP Bulls. Like, you have options. Edge, we've talked about others where that it's not as deep as interior D-line, but you have like guys like Landon Jackson. And again, Mike Green is still there, and that's a guy that fell. So it's just about the way that the board fell for them. I mean, even you can look at the offensive line position with the guys we mentioned, even like a Charles Grant out of William & Mary, who Baltimore's been linked to. I just think that Baltimore, in terms of their evaluations, if they didn't take Starks at 27, they waited till 59, Starks, Eamon, and Watts would have been gone. And then you have to deal with the steep drop-off at safety, and you still need a safety. With Starks, it's almost like the Wiggins-Rosengarten thing last year. There was a drop-off on offensive lineman after Tyler Guyton. They didn't want to spend their first-rounder on Roger Rosengarten or an offensive lineman they didn't have a first-round grade on. They felt comfortable enough with the depth in the second round when it was there, when it was supposed to be taken, where Roger Rosengarten was taken. They took Nate Wiggins, and that was that, and that was fine. So now I think that Baltimore has an opportunity, especially even if you want to take like a third-round flyer on Emory Jones. I know there's some controversy with him, but even still, there are plenty of options here in the trenches for Baltimore. I would be disappointed if they took a corner not named Will Johnson. I mean, Savon Revel's really, I like Savon Revel, but I just think that taking back-to-back secondary players when the trenches are so important, you can go edge, D-line, or O-line and be totally fine. I'd be okay with any of that. That'd be a little disappointing. I'd be disappointed in a wide receiver. And again, it's not that they're not good players. It's just positions of need. Baltimore has Rashod Bateman. They have Zay Flowers. They signed DeAndre Hopkins. You clearly have to look at the position. Now, Luther Burden falls, maybe it's a different conversation, but there have been some questions about his off-field stuff and personality and whatnot, so we'll see. I think Jack Sawyer screams Raven to me. It just feels like he does. I think that'd probably be my prediction for Baltimore in the second round is Jack Sawyer. I know some people are mixed on him, but in the college football playoffs, you talk about a big gamer like Malaki Starks, Jack Sawyer. Well, you watched this college football playoff run to the championship last year with Ohio State. That's a big gamer. He's 6'5", 260. So my official prediction is they take Jack Sawyer at, 59 in the second round, and then they take Charles Grant out of William & Mary, who they've been linked to at 90. Oh, what's their third-round pick? I don't know what their third-round pick is, but whatever their third-round pick is, I think that is where Baltimore goes. They could also maybe trade up. I'd be totally fine if they traded up for a guy or two. It's possible if a player falls. Again, if Mike Green's off their board, but maybe they feel good enough in Will Johnson, and that's who they want to trade up for. I don't know, but if there's a guy that falls, Baltimore could definitely. They still have 10 picks, and I expect there to be some movement on Baltimore's end, so we will see. But day 2, super exciting. Day 1, obviously awesome. I think Baltimore came out as a clear winner in that. And that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens, but thank you so much for tuning into the show. Again, we'll be back here later tonight, live streaming after night 2 of the draft, and we'll have a bonus episode for you coming out on Saturday morning, 6 a.m., talking about days 1 and 2 for Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned on the way out. Hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form as well, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.